I was born in agriculture. I was on a farm, and my dad was the fourth generation, the fifth generation on the farm there. And technology and new things change so rapidly. Even in those days, we think of today's changing rapidly, not compared to those days. I had little or no interest in school. Had it not been for playing baseball, I'd never finished high school. If it had been in the fall, right? My dad and mother were both on my back. They insisted I get a college degree, and because he had one, his brother had one. His brother was the dean of the College of Agriculture and Home Economics, Kansas State University, and a prestigious educator. And my dad did a lot of educational work, Forestry Associated. So the family had a long history of educational promotion. Dad and mother both wanted me to go to college, and I thought, I want to go to college, I want to farm. Because something about the farm, the hard work, the dirt and all that, that's a negative. But there's so many positives about working on a farm that I just couldn't pass it up. My younger brother has a PhD in dairy histology. Nobody in the world knows more about the reproductive tract of a dairy cow than he does. And he spent half his life with his hands up a cow's ass, palpitating uteruses and cervix and all that. And he wrote the book on artificial insemination and brought that to Kansas State, got his master's PhD there by teaching in vitro fertilization and embryo transplant and all that. And nobody in the world knows more about the reproductive tract of a cow than he does. And he did very well at it. He was well known around the world. Great-great-great-grandfather came there in 1803 with a group of people from Middletown, Connecticut, 35 men and 1 woman. And he was 18 years old. The story goes, and we don't know how to prove this, but the story goes that the Revolutionary War soldiers didn't get paid, so Congress made it up to them by creating the Far West, which was Illinois, and the Western Reserve, which was Ohio and Western Pennsylvania, and that they awarded qualified soldiers that land, $1 an acre for the Far West, Illinois, and $1.50 an acre for the Western Reserve. And the story goes that his uncle, the uncle of Josiah Starr, my great-great-great-grandfather, didn't want the grant, so he gave it to his nephew. We can't prove that, but it makes sense because the 18-year-old never served in the Revolutionary War, obviously. And his first mission there was to clear enough land to build a log cabin. He built a 12 by 18-foot log cabin, upscale with a loft. So I tell this story about him when his wife was pregnant with her 7th child or 8th child. They had a meaningful discussion between a man and wife. When she talks, you listen, then you say, yes, dear. The prospect of 10 of them living in an 12 by 18-foot log cabin with a loft, even with a loft, was more than she wanted to handle. So he built the house in 1828 that I'm living in today. It probably saved our farm. My dad was educated, my uncle, his brother, was educated to be a school teacher. My dad was educated to be a county agent. And in the meantime, they found out by adding lime to the soil, you could increase in fact, my dad had pretty well made up his mind he wasn't going to be a farmer. The farmer wouldn't produce anything. And so the news came out, Dr. Thorne, an eminent scientist back in the late 1800s, had determined that if you added lime to the soil, it would once again become fairly productive. He had to have phosphorus and potash and other things too. But the lime was the key, because even though how fertile the soil was without lime, when the pH went down below 5, It just didn't produce. The fact that he was 38 years old when I was born was the key to the fact that we became owners and operators of the farm in our late 20s and early 30s. Otherwise, great majority, in fact, I would say 90%, the farmers I knew in my life never got to do their thing, to set their own agenda till they're in their 40s and 50s, maybe never. And the old man would never give up. So it goes back to what I think I said before. It's better to be lucky than smart. You put up with the weather. You're totally dependent on Mother Nature for rainfall. And I guess I just think it's probably the challenge of making a go of things under those conditions. I can't think of any other reason. I wouldn't have ever, if I could have done it different, I wouldn't have done anything else. I think the give and take of working together like that, and when push comes to shove, they'll present a solid front. You try to interfere with their business and they'll take you out, take you on. When we started to sell hybrid corn, open pollinated regular corn sold for $1.50 a bushel, and we were charged $6 a bushel. And I'm a 14-year-old kid pedaling his bicycle down the road, talking to crusty old farmers. I didn't get a very good reception. But through research, through the county agent research, we proved it was worth it. And they just there's so many, well, I guess the best way I know how to describe it, that progress, education, progress, science increases by the square rather than the multiple. The more you know, the faster you know it, and the challenge is to keep up. That's a big challenge. In Ohio, the Farm Bureau speaks for agriculture. Now you got other orgs, you got the Grange, you've got the Farmers Union, and you've got several other small organizations. But the Farm Bureau, with 200,000 family members, speaks for agriculture. When I would testify before the legislature in various committees at times, they'd always say, well, this organization over here don't agree with Farm Bureau. I said, yeah, but there's 200,000 in Farm Bureau. They got maybe 10,000 or 5,000. So numbers talk, numbers speak, especially in politics, numbers. And it's been a good organization for young people. They promoted young people. They have all kinds of contests every year for young people. And some of our outstanding leaders today came out of that young people conferences. I say marry a farm girl or inherit one from your dad.
It's interesting to plant a kernel of corn and see it grow up and become a stalk and give you an ear back with a lot of kernels on it.
Besides that, I think it gets in your blood.
Tell me about that.
Well, I'm hardly able to do it anymore, but I've got my garden and I can and I freeze and a lot of foods and I can't quit.
If you plant a crop, most generally you're going to get a harvest, and that's interesting. And if you have cows and you breed that cow and she has a baby and then you milk her and sell the milk, and that's how you make your living. Oh, well, my dad used to do all his work with a team of horses. And then, well, I don't know. I was about a freshman in high school, I guess, when he bought his first tractor, a used old tractor, and that started it. And we worked together. My dad was great to work with, and he had a small dairy herd, and then eventually I bought a couple calves, and they became milk cows, and that's how we started in.
When I was a kid, we raised a lot of produce things. That's how we made a living. We had raised a lot of celery. I said I spent the summers on my hands and knees weeding celery. You got across the field and you started all over again. And my sister and I were the hard men. And I guess that's kind of taken its toll on my back, I don't know.
She went from being on her knees to a tractor seat.
Well, I did that too, but not like I haven't since we're married. It's been a good life. It's been a good life. And I think it's been good for our children. They all know how to work.
Good Lord's been good to us. We've been able to, well, when we built our new house, when we moved into, it was paid for. I was county president for how many years? Huh?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I was county president. And every year the presidents go to Washington, D.C. and meet with your congressman, you know, or senator, or whichever. And that was quite an experience for a farm boy. That's a reward of being in a good organization, is meeting the great people. We've both been Christians all our lives, and now as we're getting older, it's still important to us.
I moved to the farm from the city, you might say, and I got along. I mean, Charles's mother and dad were still living in the house. It was sort of divided, so we had our own part. And that was the agreement when we bought the farm. We'd pay so much a month and give them the right to live there as long as they lived. I had some education in accounting, and I worked 2 jobs before I was married, and they were both accounting jobs. And then I worked the fields. I did about everything on the farm except milk the cows. And I taught millinery, people how to make hats, and just for a little extra income and for something other than being on the farm 48-7 hours. And but I enjoyed it, or I wouldn't have stayed, or I wouldn't have done it. Or you had a little idea of the hard work that a farmer's wife goes through, but it can be challenging, and it can be as hard as you want to make it. And so I was raised to know how to cook and to sew. My mother was a seamstress, a school teacher. Of course, I didn't get my brains from her, but anyway, I just made up my mind that I was going to do. And I think I did, you know. I mean, I cooked and I sewed and worked in the fields. And we had some good times too with his square dance band. And but when we got to the place where we were milking a lot of cows, then we gave it up. Because you can't be out till midnight or 12:30, 1 o'clock, 3 nights a week and still get up and milk a lot of cows and do the field work. So we gave it up. I liked working outside, and I always had a small greenhouse. I loved raising flowers and planting them, and I never sold any. I gave them away. Some years I would raise 1,000 geraniums, and I'd give them away, you know. And it was real nice to have something like that. If somebody did something nice for you, and the flowers were ready to take out of the greenhouse, I'd put 6 or 8 in a peck basket and give it to them as a gift. Starting this museum and working in here, looking for artifacts from anywhere from flea markets to garage sales. And I like people, and so I enjoyed the company. I was on the Park and Recreation Advisory Council for 14 years, and there was a lot, every meeting we would go to a different state park once a month, and I enjoyed that. And then I was Farm Bureau board member for 20 years, and I was the only woman on the board at that time. Now they have 3 or 4. Well, I hate to say this, but I think keeping peace in the family. Well, in a way you had an independence, you know. It was sometimes very hard, but you're your own boss. You know, you more or less didn't have anybody, like if you worked in a factory or an office somewhere, that you had somebody that was looking over their shoulder at you all the time. There's a certain independence in farming. So, and it's what you make it, you know, so to speak. But no, I probably would, I'd do over again, you know.
My dad farmed for 13 years after he was married, and then we were chased out of the farm by the state of Ohio by eminent domain to build the Nemesilla Reservoir. And at that time he changed careers, I guess you'd call it today, and became a Farm Bureau insurance agent.
My sister and I had to get up in the mornings when we were kids, milk the cows before we went to school. My dad's health was not good, so we had to do that. And my dad was a truck farmer, I guess you would call him. He raised vegetables of all kinds. And we spent our life, I think, on our hands and knees pulling weeds. We didn't like it too well, but we had to do it. It didn't hurt us, I guess.
60 years ago, all farmers had chickens, cows, and pigs. But soon after that, you kind of had to choose one or the other and go bigger with it, and we chose the dairy end of it. After I reached, I call it Social Security age, our son was then with us on the farm, had a small share in the operation. And when I reached that age, I said, I've been boss up to this time and you've helped me. Now you're going to be the boss and I'm going to help you. And we turned it over to him, and he took over the cattle and the farm machinery. He had already had at that time interest in both the cattle and the machinery, and that's the way it's been ever since. And I still do pretty much what I've always done. I get up every morning and help with chores 7 days a week, and I like it that way because he has the management part to take care of, and as you get larger, why management is more important and takes up more time, and he's better at that than I ever was, so it's working out well. Yes, Summit County has become an urban county. Used to be, 60 years ago, used to be quite rural. But that has changed with the influx of a lot of people. And all the other dairy farmers kind of sold their land for housing or one thing or another. And it just happens that our farm now is located in a rather isolated spot where we can still farm without too many neighbors complaining about the odor. And my son likes what he does, and I would imagine he'll continue until he's ready to quit too. So some of the challenges, of course, one of the biggest ones I can think of with renting land up and down the road is traveling the highway with equipment. There's a lot of cars on the road now, and they're not too happy when they get behind a hay wagon that's only going 10 miles an hour. But we get along. Agriculture, I think, has changed just as much and as rapidly as industry. And unless you're up on things like even computers and that type of thing, modern day machinery, the cost is getting to be terrific, but you gotta kind of go with the flow or you're going to lose out.
The wife of a farmer. Well, when I was younger, I worked right along with my husband in the fields all the time. But I had a mother who helped to take care of our children. She did the cooking for me. I enjoyed working on the farm. And when I turned, well, I don't know how old I was, doesn't matter. Anyway, I guess when Denny took over the farm, they told me I was too old to ride the tractor anymore. So I had to quit. Yeah, but I enjoyed it.
We always enjoyed our farm friends, and especially, I've always said, without Farm Bureau and our church, our social life would have been almost nothing. So, we have been a member of a Farm Bureau Advisory Council group, as they call them, ever since we were married, and that's about 62 years already. And that council is still going, and there's a couple of us that are original members. As I said, farming has changed just as dramatically as industry. And you don't do things the same as you did 50 years ago. Although, I guess you would say there's only really one way to put a kernel of corn in the ground and raise corn. But the trend is to bigness. And that has been going on now for quite a few years. And the way I see it, it's going to continue even at a faster rate. The family type farm is dwindling. And there are farmers that farm the neighbors' farms, rent the land, like some that we farm. They used to be farmers, but they don't anymore, and they rent the land out. And I think this is the case, though, across the country, where a few are still sticking with farming, and they're buying this huge equipment, and they can take care of 1,000 acres easier than we used to take care of 100. And it's probably a good thing, because as I just heard on the radio, by 2050, we will have to double our food production to feed the world. And when you say double food production, that's a pretty big order. We used to have, if we farmed 100 acres, if we had 20 acres of corn, that was about it. We planted it, we cultivated it, we didn't spray it, we cultivated it. And of course, we were beyond the years when they cut it by hand and husk it by hand, but we would pick it one row at a time and haul the ears into the corn crib and shovel it off into the crib. Nowadays, we plant 6 rows at a time, and we combine 6 rows at a time. And boy, you can put a lot more corn away than 1 row at a time. And it's the way with everything. We used to make a living milking 12, 14, 16 cows. But now, years ago, they said one dairy farmer has to milk at least 50 to make a decent income for a family. And that's been years ago when they said that, so I suppose that's why my son's milking 100. But when you got modern equipment, you can do a lot more. And in the spring, to look out over a field that is pure alfalfa, no weeds in it, and it's just a beautiful looking crop. And this time of year, as the corn is tall now, and look across the field that looks to be a very good crop, gives you a feeling of success. In this area, we've been quite fortunate. As we hear news from other parts of the country where they have severe droughts and even flooding. This spring was a tough spring for most farmers, but our land was never underwater, so to speak, and we have a lot to be thankful for. We don't have a big pension to look forward to. Self-employed person doesn't have a pension. But I would say the Lord has been good enough to us that we've been able to put a little aside. Hopefully it'll reach till we turn our toes up, but who knows? I mean, it won't. But there are a lot of people in this country that live on very little. And if you want to broaden that out to the world, there's we're very fortunate.
Right.
Yes. We've been members of Farm Bureau from the time we were married. And of course, with my dad's involvement with the Farm Bureau insurance part of it, made us even more interested. And to us, Farm Bureau was our spokesman, and really is the spokesman for the individual farmer. Other than Farm Bureau, of course, Grange was a big agricultural organization, but you don't hear too much about Grange, at least around here anymore, like you used to. But each state has their own Farm Bureau organization, each county has their own, and it's through them that each farmer has an input if he wants to take advantage of it. And I don't like to I really don't like to compare Farm Bureau to industries unions, because I shouldn't even mention that, but all right. We do have a spokesman in the name of Farm Bureau, not only statewide but nationally, and it's something that each individual farmer, as independent as he is, would not have that input that he gets through Farm Bureau. And our Summit County Farm Bureau has been very active, even into today's surroundings where farming is dwindling to almost very little in Summit County, but yet we do have a voice there, and for that I'm thankful. When we first started milking cows, we had an old-fashioned barn that had a few cow stalls and a few horse stalls, and probably some pigs in the other end. And we decided we wanted to sell fluid milk, which was overseen by the health departments. And so we had to make a lot of changes, which we made some at the start, very small ones, but we did get to selling milk. And then we wanted to expand more, and I used the pencil to figure, well, how much is this going to cost? And I come up with a figure of $10,000. And Doreen says we can't afford that much money. And we didn't argue about it, but we discussed it a long time. And finally I decided that, well, even if she doesn't think it's right, I'm going to do it anyway. And so we did. And we built a more modern dairy barn, put a gutter cleaner in, and we put in stanchions, tie stalls, and we had a milk line, milked with machines, and all for $10,000. We usually paid for what we bought, and People nowadays have credit cards. They don't operate that way. But not saying that is all wrong. If we would have been smart, we'd have went in debt head over heels and probably come out smelling like a rose. But we didn't do it that way, but times do change. The young generation is not eager to become farmers. Once in a while there will be, of course, but as I said, with our sons, with our grandsons, my son gets up at 3:15, 7 days a week. Christmas and Thanksgiving, and he never fails. And he doesn't get home until around 7 o'clock in the evening. Of course, he goes home for lunch, he goes home for breakfast after he milks in the morning. He lives right across the road. But puts in 12 to 16 hours practically every day.